Months after a wave of unrest swept through Southern California, an eruption that saw police vehicles burn, federal officers doused with pepper spray, and freeways turned into battlegrounds, the United States government delivered its response. In a coordinated crackdown that stunned Los Angeles, federal agents carried out a series of pre-dawn raids that resulted in 97 arrests, marking one of the most extensive federal operations tied to civil unrest in recent city history. The initial violence began in early June, ignited during a tense period of public outrage over federal immigration enforcement actions. What started as scattered demonstrations quickly escalated into prolonged confrontations between activists and law enforcement. Freeways were shut down, crowds hurled fireworks, rocks, and improvised incendiaries, and multiple police squad cars were engulfed in flames. Federal officials say the attacks were more than chaotic outbursts. They were targeted acts meant to injure or even kill officers. "We're not talking about just rocks," one DHS official said at the time. "Bricks, steel objects, fireworks modified to behave like explosives. These were weapons capable of seriously injuring, even killing our officers." Many of the assaulted agents were hospitalized with head wounds, burns, and lacerations. For months afterward, it appeared as though the chaos had faded and no consequences would follow. The city returned to a fragile calm, and many believed federal authorities had quietly moved on. That assumption dissolved in November, when Homeland Security, the FBI, and the ATF launched a coordinated sweep across the greater Los Angeles region. Officials declared that violence against federal officers would not be tolerated and made clear that those responsible would face serious prison time. This investigation opens a window into what happened during those violent summer weeks, how the city reached a boiling point, and why federal authorities spent months reconstructing the events before moving to arrest those involved. 1. The night Los Angeles reached a boiling point. On June 8, 2025, Los Angeles entered one of the most volatile nights it had seen in decades. Early demonstrations protesting federal immigration raids began peacefully, but quickly mutated into widespread confrontations. Downtown Los Angeles experienced the first major clash. Officers reported volleys of rocks, glass bottles, and fireworks launched from overpasses. The California Highway Patrol, attempting to disperse the crowds, found themselves under attack from concrete debris dropped onto their vehicles below. LAPD officials later said that several officers sustained concussions and other injuries amid the chaos. Streets were sealed off as smoke filled the air from burning refuse and torched scooters. But that night was only the beginning. 2 days later, the unrest expanded dramatically. A crowd estimated at more than 2,000 people surged onto the 101 freeway, shutting down all lanes in both directions. Protesters chanted against ICE operations, while trapped motorists looked on helplessly. Law enforcement in riot gear tried to clear the area, but tension spiraled as agitators among the crowd refused to leave. The most shocking incident occurred when demonstrators vandalized and torched a series of driverless Waymo taxis. What many didn't realize was that each electric vehicle carried lithium-ion battery packs containing the energy equivalent of a significant explosive charge. When ignited, the batteries erupted into violent thermal reactions, reaching temperatures over 1,000 degrees Celsius. The explosions generated toxic fumes that forced firefighters to evacuate nearby blocks. 2 motorcyclists attempted to punch through police lines and were arrested after crashing into officers. Despite repeated attempts to reopen the freeway, it was closed again when rioters began dropping debris onto the southbound lanes. Officials declared the downtown area an unlawful assembly zone, but confrontations continued into the night. 2. A new front line. Violence moves beyond the city. By early July, the unrest had expanded beyond Los Angeles. On July 10th, a federal search warrant executed at a farm on the outskirts of Camarillo became the next flashpoint. As Homeland Security agents prepared to leave the property, a convoy of activists arrived, using their vehicles to blockade the exit. What followed was one of the most aggressive confrontations of the summer. DHS agents reported being struck with rocks and burning debris. One federal vehicle's windows were smashed by a metal pole, and attempts to withdraw were met with escalating hostility. City leaders scrambled to respond. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass criticized federal agencies, arguing that their immigration raids had stoked unnecessary fear. But hours later, President Donald Trump ordered 2,000 National Guard troops to support law enforcement operations across the region. Only 300 had arrived by the next morning, leaving police spread thin as violence ignited in multiple neighborhoods. Through July, dozens of officers and demonstrators were injured, scores were arrested, but beneath the surface, another, quieter battle was beginning, one that would only become visible months later. 3. Inside the federal investigation. While public attention moved on, federal agencies were far from finished. Behind closed doors, Homeland Security, the FBI, and the ATF began a meticulous investigation. Inside a Los Angeles field office, agents reviewed countless hours of cell phone videos, live streams, and security footage. Most of the rioters wore masks, but investigators combed through every frame, looking for identifying clues, tattoos, shoes, clothing, license plates, and the digital fingerprints left on social media posts. What they uncovered was a pattern. The same individuals appeared at multiple confrontations, including the freeway shutdown and the Camarillo farm raid. The Department of Justice concluded that the violence was not random, but coordinated. U.S. Attorney Bill Ossale authorized federal riot and obstruction charges, setting the stage for a sweeping enforcement operation. 4. The raids began. The first wave of arrests came before sunrise. Teams of federal agents fanned out across South Los Angeles, Ventura County, and the San Fernando Valley. 12 suspects were detained that morning alone. Among them was Isaiah Carrillo, caught on video smashing federal vehicle windows during the Camarillo confrontation. Another major suspect, Virginia Reyes, was accused of using her car to trap agents' vehicles inside the farm property and attempting to film inside their cars, an act authorities described as an attempt to identify or dox officers. But perhaps the most surprising discovery was the confirmation of an organized network coordinating rapid turnout whenever federal agents initiated an immigration operation. This network, often referred to as a rapid response group, used encrypted messaging apps, social media broadcasts, and group texts to mobilize activists at a moment's notice. According to officials, the goal was not peaceful protest, but to obstruct immigration enforcement and overwhelm officers during operations. Investigators tracked multiple Telegram channels and group chats to track how quickly crowds formed. The system, they concluded, was organized chaos, a distributed network with no single leader but a highly efficient mobilization structure. By the end of the first week of raids, the number of people charged grew to 97. 39 were indicted by a grand jury. 18 pleaded guilty. Others remained under investigation. Still, federal agents insisted that the enforcement actions were only the beginning. 5. Community fallout and political tensions. While federal agencies celebrated the operation as a significant victory, the aftermath exposed deeper fissures within the city. Local business owners, many already struggling from years of economic instability, voiced frustration that their stores were left to fend for themselves during the unrest. Broken windows, blocked roads, and weeks of reduced foot traffic left some businesses unable to recover. City leaders criticized the federal raids for stoking fear in immigrant communities. Federal authorities countered that local officials had failed to contain the violence when it first erupted. Meanwhile, the FBI released new wanted photos for individuals accused of assaulting officers or setting vehicles ablaze. One suspect involved in the Camarillo raid, allegedly seen firing a weapon, had a reward of $100,000 attached to his capture. But even as arrests mounted, questions lingered. Was the crackdown justified? Did it restore order? Or did it intensify the distrust simmering beneath the surface?
6. Into the courtroom. By fall, the chaos on the streets had shifted to the courts. Federal prosecutors pursued charges for assaulting officers, obstructing federal operations, damaging government property, and participating in violent riots. Prosecutors emphasized that these cases were not political. This isn't a game, they said. These are serious crimes. One defendant who allegedly rammed his vehicle into federal agents was both wounded by gunfire and subsequently charged, now facing up to 20 years in prison. Defense attorneys argued that many of those arrested were peaceful demonstrators swept up in a chaotic scene. But prosecutors played surveillance footage showing individuals lighting debris on fire, throwing projectiles, and fueling flames with accelerants near CHP vehicles. Another set of videos connected several defendants to the Camarillo farm attack. New images of fugitives were released as the manhunt continued. Civil rights advocates accused the government of conflating protest with riot, warning that aggressive federal responses could suppress lawful dissent. But federal officials insisted their actions were necessary to protect officers and uphold the law. 7. A national warning. The violence in Los Angeles was not an isolated event. Officials say similar patterns began emerging in cities across the country. In Chicago, ICE teams faced coordinated attacks on patrol vehicles during deportation operations. In Portland, federal buildings were again targeted with incendiary devices and high-powered lasers. Investigators found that the same online groups promoting or coordinating the LA riots reappeared under new names but with identical tactics. Federal officials described the situation as a moving network, a decentralized ecosystem spreading from city to city. Whenever violence flared, familiar faces appeared, both online and in person. This trend forced federal and state agencies to rethink their approach to demonstrations. Law enforcement units nationwide began studying the Los Angeles footage as a case study in rapid escalation. New training programs required officers to analyze how quickly peaceful protests could turn violent. DHS officials say this training has already improved response strategies, helping officers maintain discipline under provocation. According to authorities, the 2025 events fundamentally reshaped how the United States prepares for and responds to civil unrest. 8. The larger question. In the end, the Los Angeles riots and subsequent federal crackdown became more than a regional story. They evolved into a national debate. Was the violence a symptom of deeper frustrations with immigration policy, policing, and inequality? Or was it the result of organized groups exploiting political tensions to provoke conflict? And, perhaps most importantly, do large federal crackdowns reduce violence or intensify it? Federal officials insist that aggressive enforcement is necessary to protect agents and prevent unrest from metastasizing. Critics argue that heavy-handed tactics only deepen distrust and risk turning demonstrations into cycles of retaliation. As federal agents continue tracking the networks involved, and as trials move forward, Los Angeles finds itself still grappling with the aftermath. The city must confront not only the physical scars left behind, but the deeper question of whether the next spark of unrest is already on its way.